The mess hall was loud in the way only military spaces could be. Metal trays clattering against stainless steel counters, boots scraping across worn linoleum. Muffled conversations bouncing off cinder block walls painted that particular shade of institutional beige that existed nowhere else in the world. Yet at the far corner table, one woman sat alone, eating with the calm precision of someone who never wasted movement. She didn't look up when the energy in the room shifted, but she felt it. The subtle change in pressure that came when predators identified prey. The slight drop in nearby conversations. The weight of attention turning her direction like a searchlight finding its target in darkness. Three recruits barely out of boot camp carried themselves with the kind of swagger that came from not yet learning the difference between confidence and carelessness. Their voices dropped as they approached her table, low enough to sound threatening, but loud enough to draw attention. She kept her eyes on her food until a shadow fell across the tray, and a hand smirking entitled pressed down on its edge, as if to claim ownership of the moment. The scrape of metal on metal cut through the room, silencing nearby chatter. She finally raised her gaze, studying their posture. The way they positioned themselves between her and the exit. How each one waited for the others to laugh first. They thought they were about to make a point, that this would be quick, easy, forgettable. They had no idea who they were talking to. The recruit leaning on her tray tilted his head with a smirk that tried too hard. "You sure you're in the right place, ma'am? Officers usually sit with their own kind." Another chimed in before she could respond, sweeping his gaze over her uniform as if searching for a reason to dismiss her. "Or did you wander in from admin? They've been sending all sorts over here lately." Their friends at nearby tables snickered, eager for entertainment. The kind that came at someone else's expense. She didn't flinch, didn't rise to the bait. Her face remained steady, unreadable. The kind of calm that didn't have to prove itself. Their amusement grew when she didn't react. People like them thrived on attention, and her stillness only encouraged them to escalate. The first recruit stepped close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. "She's not going to say anything," he laughed, glancing back at his buddies. "Probably scared she'll get lost on the way out." His friends blocked the aisle beside her table, cutting off her exit with deliberate casualness. The mess hall had begun to quiet, a few heads turning, drawn by the subtle shift in atmosphere. When she finally reached for her tray to stand, a hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to claim dominance. The room paused, with him waiting to see what she would do. She met his eyes with a calm so absolute it unsettled him, though he tried to hide it. He didn't know why his pulse skipped, why a flicker of doubt crossed his face. All he knew was that something in her gaze made the air feel heavier, as if an unseen fault line had silently formed beneath their feet. Her voice stayed low, steady, almost gentle. "Walk away. Last chance." For a heartbeat, none of them moved. Then the tallest one barked out a laugh, the kind that tried too hard to sound fearless. "Or what? You'll file a complaint. Go ahead, sweetheart." Their laughter echoed in the widening silence, a hollow sound against concrete walls. Her eyes drifted from face to face, not in fear, but in calculation. Years of training flickered to life behind her calm expression. The one holding her wrist had too much weight on his heels, easy to unbalance. The loud one to her right stood broad but sloppy, knees locked overconfident. The third hovered behind them, shifting nervously, his stance split between courage and the instinct to flee. She noted their spacing, the angle of their shoulders, even the tension in their hands. All of it logged, measured, filed away in an instant. Something subtle changed in her posture. Something only those with real combat awareness would notice. Her center of gravity lowered, breath steadying, muscles loosening rather than tightening. The mess hall, sensing the shift without fully understanding it, began to fall into a hush. Forks paused midair. Conversations tapered off. The energy in the room pulled inward, as if everyone felt the same invisible drop in pressure. She looked back at the recruit still holding her wrist. His smile faltered, just a flicker, but enough. Then it happened, so fast that most people in the room would struggle later to describe the sequence in order. Only the feeling of watching something they were never meant to witness. She shifted her wrist a single inch, just enough to loosen his grip, and in that sliver of space she slid her hand free, turning it in a fluid arc that caught his thumb at the precise angle needed to collapse his hold. His breath hitched in surprise, but before he could pull back, she guided his arm downward and twisted. a clean wrist lock that forced him onto one knee. As he fell, the handle of a small training blade slipped from his pocket, barely visible. Contraband he shouldn't have had. She plucked it from the floor before it even settled, more like she'd taken it from him than found it. He tried to rise, but her palm struck his shoulder with measured force, directing momentum rather than creating it. The movement toppled him sideways, and she guided him into a controlled trip, pinning him with a single knee between his shoulder blades. The knife rotated effortlessly in her hand until its dull edge rested beneath his jaw. Not cutting, just reminding. Gas rippled around the mess hall. The second recruit lunged, believing size could compensate for skill. She met his charge by stepping inside his center line, hooking his arm, and using his own weight to lever him up and over her shoulder. He hit the ground with a thud, more surprising than painful, staring up at the ceiling, as if it had betrayed him. The third recruit hesitated, courage evaporating. Survival instincts kicked in, and he tried to bolt, but she intercepted him with a sweep that took his legs cleanly from under him. He landed flat, the sound echoing through the room like punctuation. When she finally rose, the mess hall was silent, except for the ragged breathing of the three recruits who had entered so confidently only moments before. She placed the confiscated knife on the table, stepped back with calm composure, and let her gaze sweep across the stunned faces around her. "Lesson 1, she said softly. Never corner someone you haven't researched." The door swung open, and a senior officer stepped inside, pausing at the sight of the frozen room. His gaze moved quickly from the recruits on the floor to her standing calmly beside them. "Lieutenant Thorne," the word hung in the air like a dropped weight. "Everything all right, Lieutenant?" The recruits' faces slackened as the meaning hit their minds, scrambling to connect the woman they had mocked with the rank they had ignored. She turned slightly, giving the officer a respectful nod. As she did, the overhead lights caught the small gold pin on her collar, the unmistakable shape of the SEAL trident. A murmur rippled across the mess hall as recognition spread. It was one thing to underestimate an officer. It was another to pick a fight with someone who had survived the most brutal training the military had to offer. She looked down at the recruits, not unkindly, but with the firm clarity of someone who had seen this pattern too many times before. "Next time," she said, her voice steady enough to cut through the room, "look at a person's collar before you open your mouth." The screen went black. Then in stark white letters against the darkness, Fallujah, Iraq. The scene that emerged from the black was chaos rendered in dust and blood. A street corner in Fallujah, buildings reduced to skeletal remains, smoke rising in thick columns that blotted out the sun. The crack of small arms fire punctuated the air, distant but constant, the soundtrack of a city tearing itself apart. A woman in desert camouflage fatigues crouched behind a burned-out vehicle, blood soaking through her uniform. Not her own. She pressed gauze to the chest of a Marine who couldn't have been more than 19, his face pale, eyes wide with the knowledge that he was dying. "Stay with me," she said, her voice firm, despite the tremor in her hands. "You're going home. You hear me? You're going home." The name tape on her uniform read Sullivan. Captain, Army, Combat Medic. She was 23 years old. The Marine tried to speak, blood bubbling at his lips. She leaned closer, still. Applying pressure, still fighting death, even as it won. Footsteps pounded toward her position. A man in SEAL fatigues, older. His face lined with the kind of experience that came from decades in the teams, dropped beside her. "Linnea," he said, his voice breaking on the name. "We have to go, now." "I can save him," she insisted, pressing harder on the wound. "He's gone, honey. We have to move." She looked up at him, and for a moment the resemblance was unmistakable. The same gray-green eyes, the same set to the jaw. Father and daughter brought together by war in the worst possible way. "Dad, I can't just..." The explosion that cut her off was deafening. The building behind them collapsed, sending a wave of concrete dust and debris cascading over their position. When it cleared, they were both on the ground, ears ringing, choking on dust. Master Chief Garrett Sullivan pulled himself up first, reaching for his daughter. She was already moving, already trying to get back to her patient, but the Marine was beyond help now, beyond anything. They moved through the rubble together, him leading, her following, until they reached a relatively secure position in what had once been someone's home. The walls were pockmarked with bullet holes. A child's drawing still hung on one wall, somehow untouched by the violence. Linnea sank against the wall, her hands shaking now that there was no one to save. Garrett knelt beside her, checking her for injuries with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this too many times. "I'm okay," she said, but her voice was hollow. "You're not. Neither am I." He sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "This is hell, Linnea. This whole damn war is hell." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her blood-covered hands. Then so softly he almost didn't hear it. "I saw something yesterday. Something wrong." He turned to her, fully alert now. "What did you see?" "American contractors, private security. They weren't securing anything." Her voice dropped even lower. "They were executing civilians, Dad. For fun. Like it was a game. I documented it. Photos, recordings. I have evidence." The color drained from Garrett's face. "Linnea, no, you can't." "They saw me," she continued, as if she hadn't heard him. "They know I know. One of them, he said his boss would take care of it, said the boss was connected. High up." She finally met her father's eyes. "Dad, I think they're going to kill me." "Then we go to command. Right now, we—" The crack of the rifle shot was sharp and precise, so different from the chaotic firefight around them. This was deliberate, aimed. Linnea jerked forward, her eyes going wide with shock. A red bloom spread across her back just below her left shoulder blade. Exit wound in her chest, center mass impossible to survive. She collapsed forward into Garrett's arms. "No," he breathed the word, barely a sound. "No, no, no." He lowered her down, hands already moving to apply pressure to do something, anything. But he knew. 25 years as a SEAL, he knew what a fatal wound looked like. Linnea's lips moved, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. He leaned close, his ear to her lips. "Not insurgents," she whispered, each word costing her everything. "American. Brennan knows." Her eyes found his one last time. Gray-green meeting gray-green. Then the light left them. Garrett Sullivan held his daughter's body and screamed, a sound of pure anguish that cut through the ambient violence of Fallujah like a knife, the kind of sound that haunted men for the rest of their lives. Around him, the battle continued, indifferent to his grief. The screen faded to black again. 3 weeks earlier, Naval Base Coronado, California. The sun was just beginning to rise over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if Lieutenant Kira Thorne had been paying attention. She wasn't. Her focus was on the building ahead of her, the Naval Special Warfare Command, where she was about to report for her new assignment. Third base in 2 years. The thought sat in her mind like a stone, not because she had failed, she never failed, but because she had succeeded too well, too visibly, and success for a woman in the teams came with its own set of consequences. Too good, too threatening, too female. They always found reasons to transfer her. Personality conflicts, they called it. Not a good fit for the unit culture. "We think you'd be better utilized elsewhere." Translation: you make the men uncomfortable, and their comfort matters more than your competence. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag and walked through the gates, showing her ID to the guard. He barely glanced at it, waving her through with the practiced indifference of someone who checked hundreds of IDs a day. The base was already coming to life around her, PT formations running past in neat rows, cadence calls echoing off buildings. The smell of salt air mixed with diesel fuel and fresh paint. Familiar. Every base smelled the same under the surface. She found her way to the admin building, checked in with a clerk who looked at her uniform with poorly disguised curiosity and received her quarters assignment and briefing schedule. Training advisor, the order said. She'd be working with recruits, preparing them for BODOS, the basic underwater demolition SEAL training that separated those who could from those who couldn't. The irony wasn't lost on her. They didn't want her operating, so they'd make her teach others how to operate. Fine. She'd done harder things than teach entitled recruits to respect the ocean. Her quarters were standard, single-room basic furniture, a window that looked out at the Pacific. She dropped her duffel on the bed and stood at that window for a long moment, watching the waves. 29 years old, 8 years in the Navy, 2 years as a SEAL, and still fighting the same battle she'd been fighting since she first decided this was the path she wanted. Her father had died when she was 8. Panama, 1989. JSOC operation that went sideways. She barely remembered him, but she remembered the flag they gave her mother. The way it was folded, the precise triangular shape, the weight of it in her small hands. He never got to see women serve in combat, never got to see his daughter become something he would have been proud of. She was doing it for him. And for every woman who came after her. But God, sometimes it was exhausting. A knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find a man in his late 60s, Master Chief anchors on his collar, his face weathered by decades of sun and salt water. His gray-green eyes studied her with an intensity that felt like being scanned. "Lieutenant Thorne," he said. It wasn't a question. "Master Chief?" "Garrett Sullivan. I run training operations here. You're mine for the next 6 months." She waited, sensing there was more coming. "I'm going to be harder on you than anyone else." He continued, his voice flat, matter of fact. "Not because you're a woman, because if you're going to train my recruits, you need to prove you can still operate at the highest level." "We clear, Crystal, Master Chief." "Good. P at 0500, full kit. Don't be late." He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at her. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by the professional distance of a senior enlisted dealing with a junior officer. "Welcome to Coronado, Lieutenant." The door closed behind him, leaving her alone with the certainty that the next 6 months were going to be anything but easy. The first week was exactly what she expected. Garrett Sullivan tested her relentlessly. Extra PT while others rested. Surprise drills at midnight. Impossible standards that would have broken someone less determined. She met every challenge with quiet competence. When he made her demonstrate combat diving procedures, she performed them flawlessly. When he demanded she run room-clearing drills with live ammunition, she cleared the course faster than any instructor on record. The other personnel watched with varying degrees of interest, some with simple curiosity, others with quiet irritation, and a few with something sharper, an unspoken question about how someone like her ended up wearing a SEAL trident. She didn't blame them entirely. People feared what didn't fit their expectations, and she had never fit neatly into anyone's. The whispers trailed her through hallways, drifting just loud enough to catch words like quota experiment, publicity stunt. She never reacted. Let them talk. She had learned long ago that people who judge quickly often learn slowly. What almost none of them realized, and what she never volunteered, was exactly what she had endured to earn that trident pin. The memories came unbidden sometimes, usually at night when her guard was down. Hell Week, Night 3, the coldest, darkest, most brutal stretch of buds. The Pacific Ocean in January was 58 degrees, cold enough to kill if you stayed in too long, cold enough to make you question every decision that brought you to that moment. They had been in the surf zone for 4 hours, locked arm in arm, sitting in the breaking waves, water crashing over their heads every 30 seconds. The instructors standing on the beach, dry warm, watching for the moment when someone's will broke. The bell sat on a post 20 feet from the water's edge. 3 rings and you were out. 3 rings and the pain stopped. 3 rings and you could be warm again. 60% of her class had already wrung out. Kira sat in that water, feeling her body shutting down, hypothermia setting in. Her hands had stopped shaking, which was a bad sign. Her thoughts were getting fuzzy, which was worse. The instructor's voice carried over the sound of the waves. "Ring the bell, Thorne. You don't belong here. Save yourself the embarrassment." Her classmates around her were in the same condition. Some worse. One man was mumbling to himself, seeing things that weren't there. Another had gone completely silent, which meant he was close to medical intervention. She wanted to quit. God, she wanted to quit. But then, clear as if he were standing beside her, she heard her father's voice. A memory from when she was 5, before Panama, before everything went wrong. They'd been at the beach and she'd been scared of the waves. "The ocean's bigger than you," he'd said, kneeling in the sand to meet her eyes. "It'll always be bigger than you, but that doesn't mean you have to be afraid of it. You just have to respect it, work with it, and never ever quit on yourself." In the surf zone at BO Days, shivering so hard her teeth cracked together, Kira made her choice. She wasn't going to ring that bell. Not for the pain, not for the cold, not to prove the doubters right. She survived Hell Week, survived the months of training that followed, survived everything they threw at her, because quitting was never an option. And when they pinned that trident to her uniform, she felt her father standing beside her, felt his pride even though he couldn't be there to see it. That memory sustained her now at Coronado as she faced a different kind of test. Not physical, but social. Political. The challenge of existing in a space that didn't quite know what to do with her. The second week brought her first encounter with the three recruits who would eventually corner her in that mess hall. She was running them through urban warfare simulations, teaching them how to clear rooms without getting killed. Standard stuff, but it required absolute precision. One mistake in a fatal funnel and you were dead. The recruits were typical. Young, fit, overconfident. They listened to her instructions with varying degrees of attention. The tallest one, Holden Reese, kept glancing at his buddies during her briefings. The kind of glances that said, "Can you believe we're taking orders from her?" The biggest one, Bryce Calloway, followed Holden's lead in everything. Classic follower personality. Probably had been following someone else his whole life. The youngest, Ethan Vaughn, at least seemed to be paying attention, but there was something in his eyes. Conflict. Like he was fighting with himself about whether she deserved to be there. During one exercise, Holden deliberately ignored her instructions, entering a room the wrong way. In a real scenario, he would have taken a burst of fire straight to the chest. In the simulation, he triggered the laser sensors that indicated a kill. She stopped the exercise, gathered them together. "Reese," she said calmly, "why did you die?" "Bad luck, ma'am." "Bad luck." She let the words hang there. "You think combat is about luck? I think sometimes the layout doesn't match what intel says. So you improvise, but you improvise based on fundamentals. You pie the corner, you slice the room, you never ever walk straight into a fatal funnel." She paused. "Run it again." He did it the same way, died the same way. She didn't react with anger. That would have given him what he wanted. Instead, she simply documented it in her report and moved on to the next recruit. Later, she overheard them in the hallway. "She doesn't know what she's talking about," Holden said. "Probably passed buds because they needed to fill a quota." Bryce laughed. "Yeah, no way she made it through Hell Week with the same standards we'll face." Ethan was quiet, which meant he was either agreeing or thinking. She couldn't tell which. She didn't confront them, didn't report them, just filed it away, knowing that the truth would reveal itself eventually. It always did. The third week brought an unexpected development. She returned to her quarters one evening to find a manila folder on her bunk. No markings on the outside, no indication of who had left it or why. She opened it carefully, her training making her cautious even in what should have been a secure space. Inside was a military after-action report. Classified. Date stamped April 2004. Location Fallujah, Iraq. The name at the top of the report, Captain Linnea Sullivan, United States Army combat medic. Kira's pulse quickened as she read. The report detailed an incident where Captain Sullivan had provided medical aid to 3 wounded Marines under fire. It mentioned her bravery, her skill, her dedication. What it didn't mention, but what Kira noticed immediately, was that the circumstances of her death didn't match the official story. The report said enemy fire, but the trajectory analysis buried in the appendix suggested the shot had come from a different direction, from a building controlled by American forces. There was a handwritten note paper-clipped to the last page. Just 3 lines written in precise block letters. "They killed her because she knew. Now they're watching you. G.S. Garrett Sullivan." Kira sat on her bunk, the folder in her hands, pieces of a puzzle she didn't understand, beginning to form a picture she didn't like. Sullivan had a daughter who died in Fallujah. That much was common knowledge on the base. People whispered about it, about how he'd never been the same after. How he'd spent the last 20 years training SEALs with a kind of intensity that bordered on obsession. But why give this to her? Why now? She read through the report again more carefully this time, found inconsistencies, irregularities, things that suggested the official story was a cover-up. Captain Sullivan had witnessed something important enough to kill her over. And now someone wanted Kira to know about it. The question was why, and who. She locked the folder in her wall locker and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't settle. The pieces were there, but she couldn't yet see how they fit together. The answer would come, she knew. It always did. But something told her that when it came, she wasn't going to like it. The next morning, Garrett Sullivan pulled her aside after PT. "Walk with me, Lieutenant." They walked along the beach far enough from the base that their conversation wouldn't be overheard. The sun was rising over the Pacific, turning the water gold. You read the file, he said. Not a question. I did. Then you know my daughter didn't die the way they said she did. Kira was quiet, letting him tell it his way. Linnea was the best combat medic I ever saw. He continued, his voice rough with old grief. She had a gift, could keep people alive in situations that should have killed them. But she had something else too, a conscience, a sense of right and wrong that didn't bend even in war. He stopped walking, staring out at the ocean. 2004, Fallujah. She witnessed American contractors executing Iraqi civilians, not insurgents, not combatants, civilians, women, children. They were doing it for fun, for sport. Kira's stomach tightened. She documented it. Photos, video, audio recordings. She was going to report it through official channels. But they found out. 3 days later, she was dead. Single shot to the back exit wound, center mass. Perfect sniper placement. He turned to look at Kira. The official story said enemy fire. But I was there, Lieutenant. I held her while she died, and she told me, not insurgents, American. Brennan knows. Who's Brennan? Admiral Preston Brennan. At the time, he was a captain liaison to private military contractors. Now he's CINCPAC, Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet. Sullivan's jaw tightened. I've spent 20 years trying to prove he ordered my daughter's death. 20 years of running into walls. Every investigation shut down. Every lead dried up. Every witness either disappeared or recanted. Why are you telling me this? Because you're next. The words hit her like cold water. Captain Vivian Drake, Sullivan continued, your intelligence officer. She's been feeding information to Brennan. She knows you're good, knows you're a threat, and Brennan has a pattern. He eliminates threats. That's why you've been testing me so hard. I needed to know if you could survive what's coming. If you're as good as your record says. He met her eyes. You are. Maybe better than I was at your age. What do you want from me? I want you to finish what Linnea started. I want you to expose Brennan for what he is, and I want you to survive doing it. Before Kira could respond, Sullivan's radio crackled. Master Chief Sullivan, report to the commanding officer's office immediately. He clicked the radio. On my way. He looked back at Kira. Watch your back, Lieutenant, and trust your instincts. They've kept you alive this long. He walked away, leaving her alone on the beach with the weight of a conspiracy she hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. The pieces were forming a picture now, and the picture was dangerous. That afternoon, she received official deployment orders. Mission to Yemen, departure in 72 hours. Classified operation, minimal details provided. The signature at the bottom of the orders made her blood run cold. Authorized by Admiral Preston Brennan CINCPAC, she found Sullivan in the armory checking weapons for the evening training exercises. I'm being deployed, she said without preamble. Yemen, Brennan authorized it personally. Sullivan's face went pale. It's a trap. It's Fallujah all over again. Maybe, or maybe it's an opportunity. To get yourself killed. To get proof. She held his gaze. You said you've been trying for 20 years. Maybe you've been trying the wrong way. Maybe instead of investigating from outside, someone needs to get inside. That someone doesn't have to be you. Yes, it does, because I'm the one he wants dead, which means I'm the one who can draw him out. Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. Then reluctantly he nodded. You're going to need help. People you can trust. Do you have people? A few. Old teammates who never believed the official story. They've been waiting for a chance to act. Then get them ready. Because when I come back from Yemen, I'm bringing evidence. And we're going to take Brennan down. If I come back, she thought but didn't say. Sullivan seemed to hear it anyway. You'll come back, he said firmly. You're too stubborn to die. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Let's hope you're right. The final days before deployment passed in a blur of preparation. She studied the mission profile, memorized maps, ran scenarios in her head. The operation was supposed to be straightforward. Extract a high-value target from a compound in Yemen. Intelligence indicated he had information on arms trafficking networks. 8-person SEAL Team Kira, as second-in-command under Lieutenant Commander Brian Foster. On paper, it was routine. But Kira had learned long ago that nothing was ever routine when it came to combat operations. There were too many variables, too many things that could go wrong, and in this case she knew at least one thing was already wrong. The mission was designed to fail, designed to get her killed in a way that looked like bad luck or enemy action. She would have to be smarter, faster, better than they expected. The night before departure, she returned to her quarters to find Garrett Sullivan waiting outside her door. "Can't sleep either," she asked. "Haven't slept well since Fallujah." He handed her a small object. "Take this." It was a radio frequency written on a weathered piece of paper. "Encrypted channel," he explained. "I'll be monitoring it during your operation. If things go sideways, use it. I can't promise I can help, but I'll be listening." She tucked the paper into her pocket. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Just come back alive." "That's the plan." He studied her face for a long moment. "You remind me of her. Linnea. Same determination, same fire in your eyes. Your same stubborn refusal to quit even when quitting is the smart choice." "Is that why you're helping me?" "I'm helping you because someone should have helped her, because I was there but I couldn't save her, and because," he paused, the words catching in his throat, "because I failed her once, I won't fail you." Kira didn't know what to say to that, so she simply nodded, understanding that some wounds never healed. They just became part of who you were. "Get some rest, Lieutenant. You have a long day ahead of you." She watched him walk away into the darkness, this man who had lost his daughter to a conspiracy he couldn't prove, who had spent 2 decades trying to find justice in a system designed to protect itself. And now somehow she had become part of that fight. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at her window watching the Pacific under moonlight, thinking about her father, about Captain Linnea Sullivan, about all the people who had died for truths that others wanted buried. Tomorrow she would deploy to Yemen. Tomorrow the trap would spring, but she would be ready because she had learned through years of choosing the harder path that the only way out was through. And Lieutenant Kira Thorne had never backed down from a fight in her life. She wasn't about to start now. The mess hall incident that would define her time at Coronado was still days away when she left for Yemen, but the seeds had already been planted. Holden Reese, Bryce Calloway, and Ethan Vaughn had been watching her, judging her, finding her wanting not because of anything she had done, but because of what she represented. A challenge to their assumptions, a question mark in their worldview. And Captain Vivian Drake had been whispering in their ears. Subtle encouragement, suggestions that Lieutenant Thorne wasn't what she appeared to be, that her presence was political, not professional. Drake had even gone so far as to slip Holden a training knife from the classified equipment room, just to see what would happen, just to create an incident that might be useful later. But that confrontation would come later, after Yemen, after everything changed. For now, as dawn broke over Coronado on the morning of her deployment, Kira Thorne stood in the armory loading magazines with the same precision she brought to everything. One round at a time, seated properly, counted and recounted. Garrett Sullivan appeared in the doorway. "Time to move, Lieutenant. Helo's waiting." She slung her gear, adjusted her plate carrier, and followed him out into the California morning. The MH-60 Blackhawk sat on the tarmac, rotors beginning to spin. Her team was already aboard. Lieutenant Commander Foster gave her a curt nod as she climbed in. The other SEALs studied her with the same mixture of curiosity and skepticism she'd been dealing with her entire career. As the helo lifted off Coronado, falling away beneath them, Kira looked down at the base, at the beach where she'd run so many miles, at the obstacle course where she'd proven herself again and again, at the mess hall where in a few weeks 3 foolish recruits would learn a lesson they'd never forget. But that was the future. Right now she had a mission to complete, and a trap to survive. The Pacific stretched out before them, endless and blue under the morning sun. Somewhere out there in Yemen, Admiral Preston Brennan's plan was already in motion, but so was hers. And Lieutenant Kira Thorne had no intention of dying in the same way Linnea Sullivan had. Not in Yemen, not anywhere. She was going to survive. She was going to get proof. And she was going to make sure that Linnea Sullivan's death meant something, even if it killed her trying. The helicopter banked west toward the rising sun, toward a mission that would test everything she'd ever learned about survival leadership and what it meant to never quit. Behind her, Coronado disappeared into the haze. Ahead of her, the trap was waiting. And somewhere between the two, Lieutenant Kira Thorne would discover exactly what she was made of. The briefing room at Forward Operating Base Sentinel smelled of stale coffee and diesel fuel. Maps covered every wall satellite imagery, marked with red circles and arrows indicating known hostile positions. Lieutenant Commander Brian Foster stood at the head of the table, a laser pointer in his hand, his face illuminated by the glow of the projector screen. Kira sat with the other 7 members of the team studying the compound layout with an intensity that made her eyes burn. Something was wrong. She'd known it since the moment they'd arrived at the phobie, but now looking at the intelligence package, the wrongness crystallized into certainty. "Target compound is here," Foster said, tapping the screen. "Two-story structure, reinforced walls, limited access points. Our HVT, Rashid Al-Mahdi, is confirmed inside based on SIGINT intercepts from 48 hours ago." 48 hours. In Yemen, where loyalties shifted like desert sand and positions changed hourly, 48 hours might as well have been 48 years. Kira raised her hand. "Commander, do we have any more recent confirmation, visual surveillance, HUMINT?" Foster's jaw tightened slightly. "The intelligence is solid, Lieutenant. NSA verified the intercepts." "I understand, sir, but the building layout in these photos doesn't match current satellite imagery." She pulled up her tablet where she downloaded the most recent overhead shots. "This window here was boarded up in the original intel. Current imagery shows it's open, and this rooftop position that's supposed to be clear, there's definitely something there now. Could be a machine gun nest." The other SEALs leaned forward to look. Foster's expression remained neutral, but she could see the irritation in his eyes. "Noted. We'll adjust on the ground if necessary." He moved on without addressing her specific concerns. "Insertion via Helo 2 clicks from target. We hump in, hit the compound at 0300, extract the HVT and exfil to the designated LZ. Time on target, 20 minutes. Questions." Kira had dozens of questions. Why was the intel so old? Why hadn't they updated their ISR, their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance? Why did this whole operation feel like it had been designed by someone who wanted them to walk into an ambush? But she kept her mouth shut. Foster had made it clear he wasn't interested in her input, and calling out a superior officer in front of the team was a good way to end your career. The other SEALs asked tactical questions: loadout, rules of engagement, extraction contingencies, all the standard stuff. Kira listened, memorizing every detail, building alternative scenarios in her head for when the primary plan inevitably fell apart. After the briefing, she geared up in silence. HK-416 with a 10.4-inch barrel, perfect for close quarters work. EOTech EXPS-3 holographic sight for rapid target acquisition. 600 rounds of 5.56mm NATO ammunition distributed across her chest, rig, and pack. Sig Sauer P226 MK25 on her hip, 4 15-round magazines of 9mm. Cry Precision JPC plate carrier with level 4 ceramic plates front and back. 30 pounds of armor that might stop a bullet but would slow her down if she had to run. She also packed her M110 SAS, the semi-automatic sniper system. 7.62mm Schmidt and Bender scope, effective range out to 800 meters. Just in case. Her instincts were screaming that this mission was going to require every skill she possessed. As she was checking her radio, making sure it was set to both the official team frequency and the encrypted channel Garrett Sullivan had given her, a shadow fell across her workspace. Lieutenant Commander Foster stood over her, arms crossed. "You have concerns about the mission, Lieutenant." "I have concerns about the intelligence, sir. The timeline doesn't feel right." "Feel." He repeated the word like it tasted bad. "We don't operate on feelings. We operate on intelligence provided by professionals whose job is to gather and analyze information. With respect, sir, those professionals aren't the ones going into the compound. We are. And if the intel is wrong, we're the ones who pay for it." Foster leaned closer, his voice dropping to a level only she could hear. "I know what you're really concerned about, Thorne. You think because you're the only woman on this team, you have to second-guess everything. Prove you're the smartest person in the room. But here's the reality. You're second in command because someone with stars on their collar wanted you on this mission. Not because you earned it. So how about you do your job and let me do mine?" He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing there with anger burning in her chest. Someone with stars on their collar. Admiral Brennan. Foster didn't know he was walking into a trap, didn't know that the mission was designed to fail. He thought Kira was just another diversity hire who'd gotten lucky, and that ignorance was going to get them all killed. She finished her gear check, triple-checking every piece of equipment. Then she found a quiet corner and pulled out the encrypted radio frequency Garrett had given her. She couldn't risk transmitting yet, not with the whole base monitoring comms. But once they were in the field, once things went wrong, she'd need it. The voice in her head sounded like her father's, though she'd barely known him. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. This felt wrong. The MH-60 Blackhawk lifted off at 2200 hours, the desert night swallowing them as they flew low and fast toward the target area. Kira sat near the door, watching the landscape pass beneath them in shades of gray and black through her PVS-31 night observation devices. The desert was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Endless dunes broken by rocky outcroppings, no lights, no signs of civilization, just emptiness that could hide an army. Foster was on the internal comms running through the plan one more time. 2 clicks out, we fast rope to the LZ. Alpha team takes the north entrance. Bravo team takes south. Thorn, you're with Bravo. We breach simultaneously, clear and hold until HVT is secured. Weapons tight unless fired upon. We're not here to start a war. The pilot's voice cut through. 1 minute. The crew chief opened the doors and hot desert air rushed in, carrying the smell of dust and aviation fuel. Kira checked her rope, made sure her gloves were secure, and prepared to descend into the darkness. 30 seconds. The helicopter flared, hovering 40 feet above the desert floor. The rope deployed with a hiss. Go, go, go! Kira went over the side, her gloved hands controlling her descent with practiced ease. She hit the ground, rolled clear, and brought her HK-416 up, scanning for threats. The rest of the team came down behind her, a smooth insertion with no visible complications. The helo peeled away its rotors, fading into the distance until there was nothing but silence and the soft whisper of wind across sand. Foster hand-signaled the team into formation. They moved out, covering the 2 kilometers to the target compound, with tactical spacing, each SEAL responsible for a sector overlapping fields of fire. Kira was on point for Bravo team, which put her in the lead position. She moved with her weapon up, eyes constantly scanning through her no-Ds, looking for the telltale signs of an ambush. Disturbed sand, fresh tracks, the glint of metal in starlight. Nothing, which somehow made it worse. Halfway to the target, she saw it. A compound ahead, right where the intelligence said it would be. But the layout was wrong. She'd memorized the satellite imagery, and this building had differences. The window configurations didn't match. The rooftop profile was different. She keyed her radio. Bravo lead, this is Bravo 2. Building profile doesn't match imagery. Foster's voice came back terse. Confirmed same coordinates. Proceed as planned. Bravo lead, recommend we hold position and reassess. This could be the wrong building. Negative. We're on timeline. All teams prepare to breach on my mark. Kira's stomach tightened. Every instinct she had was screaming that this was wrong. But Foster was in command, and she had no proof, just a gut feeling that would sound like paranoia if she pushed harder. The teams moved into position. Alpha team stacked on the north entrance. Bravo team took the south. 4 SEALs per team waiting for the breach signal. Kira was second in the stack, right behind the point man. She could feel her heart rate elevating, not from fear, but from the certainty that something bad was about to happen. Foster's voice on comms. All teams breach on 3. 1, 2, 3. The breaching charges detonated simultaneously, blowing both doors inward with a concussive thump that Kira felt in her chest. The point man moved through the fatal funnel, and Kira followed her weapon up, slicing the pie, clearing her sector. The room was empty. Not just empty, abandoned. Dust on every surface. No furniture, no equipment, no signs of recent habitation. North side clear, Alpha team reported. South side clear, the point man confirmed. Foster's voice held confusion now. Search pattern, find something. They moved through the building, clearing room after room, all empty, all abandoned. The entire compound was a shell, nothing inside but dust and the occasional piece of trash. Kira keyed her radio. Bravo lead, this is definitely the wrong building. We need to abort and reassess. Before Foster could respond, the world exploded. The RPG hit the building's exterior wall with a sound like God's hammer coming down. The concussion wave threw Kira sideways, slamming her into a wall hard enough to crack her helmet. Dust and debris filled the air, choking, blinding. Small arms fire erupted from multiple directions. The distinctive crack of AK-47s mixing with the heavier thump of a PKM machine gun. "Contact all sides," someone shouted. Kira's training took over. She pushed herself up, ignored the ringing in her ears, and moved to a window. Outside, muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. At least 20 hostiles, maybe more in prepared positions surrounding the compound. They'd walk straight into a kill box. "Bravo lead, we need to break contact," she transmitted. "This is a prepared ambush." Another RPG hit, this one closer. The building shuddered and part of the ceiling collapsed. Through the dust, she saw Foster on the ground, not moving. Blood spreading from his chest and legs where shrapnel had found the gaps in his armor. She crawled to him, staying low as bullets punched through the walls above her head. His eyes were open, conscious, but in shock. The wounds were bad, chest sealed territory, maybe worse. "Foster, can you hear me?" He tried to speak, but blood bubbled at his lips. Sucking chest wound. His lung was collapsing. No time for gentle. Kira ripped open his plate carrier, found the entrance wound, and slapped a chest seal over it. The exit wound on his back was bigger, messier. She rolled him just enough to seal that too, her hands working with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd done this dozens of times in training and twice in combat. "Bravo 2 taking command," she transmitted on the team frequency. All elements were breaking contact. Bounding Overwatch to Rally Point Alpha. "Bravo team on me." There was a moment of hesitation. A woman taking command in the middle of a firefight. But combat had a way of cutting through prejudice. Either you were competent or you weren't. There was no middle ground. "Roger that," came the responses one after another. Kira grabbed Foster's drag handle and started pulling him toward the rear of the building, toward the only exit that didn't have concentrated fire. The other SEALs provided covering fire, their HK-416s barking in controlled bursts. She got Foster into a relatively protected position and keyed her radio again. "All elements, I'm laying suppressive fire. Alpha team moves first, then Bravo. 30-second bounds. Move on my mark." She positioned herself at a window that gave her a clear field of fire across the main avenue of approach, dropped her HK-416 selector to full auto, and squeezed the trigger. 30 rounds downrange in controlled bursts, each burst aimed at a specific muzzle flash. She wasn't trying to kill just to make the enemy keep their heads down. Force them to choose between shooting and surviving. "Alpha team, move." Through her peripheral vision, she saw Alpha team break from cover, moving in a tactical bound toward the next position. The enemy fire shifted to follow them, which was exactly what she wanted. She dropped the empty magazine, slapped in a fresh one, and continued firing. The barrel of her HK-416 was getting hot now, the heat shimmering in her no-Ds. "Bravo team, move." Her own team bounded past her. She was about to follow when she saw it. A hostile in a second-story window across the street, RPG on his shoulder, aiming at her retreating team. No time to think. Kira transitioned to her M110, the rifle already slung across her back. Brought it up, acquired the target through the Schmidt and Bender scope. 300 meters, 2-mile-per-hour crosswind from left to right. 11-inch holdover for the angle. Her father's voice in her head. "Breathe, squeeze, follow through." The rifle bucked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the hostile drop the RPG, falling from his hands, clattering on the rooftop. "Threat neutralized," she transmitted. "Moving." She grabbed Foster's drag handle again and pulled. 190 pounds of human plus 65 pounds of gear. She felt it in her legs and her back, but adrenaline was a hell of a drug. She made it to the next position, her team providing cover. They were in a slight depression, now below the line of direct fire. Enough protection to think for a moment. Foster was fading, his breathing was shallow, rapid. The chest seals were holding, but he needed real medical attention. Soon. "Bravo lead, this is Bravo 2. We have casualties, heavy contact, need immediate exfil." "Static," she tried again. "Any station, this is Bravo 2. How copy?" More static. The radios were being jammed. Standard ambush tactics. Cut off their communications, isolate them, pick them apart. Which meant this wasn't just some random hostile force. This was planned, professional. Someone who knew their TTPs, their tactics, techniques, and procedures, someone who knew exactly what frequency they'd be using. Kira switched to the encrypted channel Garrett had given her. Guardian, this is Nomad. How copy? For a long moment, nothing, then through the static a voice, Garrett Sullivan. Nomad Guardian, I read you weak but clear. What's your situation? Heavy contact, walked into a prepared ambush. Multiple casualties, radios jammed, need exfil but can't reach command. I'm tracking your position. The ambush was planned, Kira. Brennan fed bad intel to your commander. You were never supposed to walk out of there. She'd known it, but hearing it confirmed still hit like a punch to the gut. Can you get us air support? Working on it, but it's going to take time. You need to survive for at least 48 hours. 48 hours, surrounded by hostiles in the middle of the Yemen desert with wounded teammates and no official support. Copy that. We'll make it work. Kira, Garrett's voice softened. Don't be a hero. Linnea was a hero and it got her killed. Be smart, be ruthless, and survive. Roger, Nomad out. She looked at her team. 8 SEALs now down to 7 effectives with Foster wounded. They were looking at her waiting for orders. She'd spent her entire career having to prove herself, having her decisions questioned, being second-guessed because of her gender rather than her competence. Right now, none of that mattered. Right now, she was the only thing standing between her team and death. Listen up, she said, her voice calm and steady despite the chaos around them. This ambush was planned. Someone sold us out, which means we can't trust official channels. We're on our own for the next 48 hours. 48 hours, one of the Alpha Team guys said. LT, we don't have supplies for 48 hours. We've got maybe 6 hours of water, limited ammo. Then we make it last. There's a structure 3 clicks northeast. Abandoned farmhouse according to my pre-mission study. We get there, we fortify, and we survive until exfil arrives. What about Foster? She looked down at the lieutenant commander. His breathing had stabilized somewhat, but he needed more than field medicine. I'll do what I can. But right now, staying here gets us all killed. We move in 5 minutes. Use the time to redistribute ammo and water. Anyone carrying extra weight, dump it. Speed matters more than comfort. They moved, because in combat, you either moved or you died, and her team understood that fundamental truth. The 3-kilometer movement took 2 hours. Moving tactically through hostile territory at night with a casualty wasn't fast, but it was methodical, careful. Every 100 meters they stopped, listened, watched. Kira was on point again, her senses hyper-alert. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound could be the prelude to an ambush. But they made it. The farmhouse appeared out of the darkness exactly where the map said it would be. A 2-story structure, mud brick construction, partially collapsed roof. Not much, but defensible. They cleared it room by room, found it empty, and began the process of turning it into a fighting position. Fields of fire were identified and cleared. Defensive positions established. The youngest SEAL on the team, a kid named Morrison who looked about 12 but was actually 22, set up improvised claymores using salvaged explosives and tripwire. Kira got Foster into the most protected room and began working on him properly. In the cold light of a red-filtered flashlight, his wounds looked worse. She packed the entrance wound with hemostatic gauze, the kind that promoted clotting, and started an IV line to replace lost fluids. Foster's eyes opened, focused on her face. "Thorn," he whispered. "Don't talk, sir. Save your strength. Should have listened to you. Intel was bad. Water under the bridge. Right now I need you to stay alive. Can you do that?" He managed a weak smile. "Guess I don't have much choice." She checked his vitals. Blood pressure was low but stable. Pulse was thready but regular. He might make it if infection didn't set in. "Get some rest, sir. I've got the watch." She left him there and moved to the roof where Morrison was setting up an observation post. The kid was good, she'd give him that. He'd picked the best position with overlapping fields of view in a covered egress route if they got overrun. "You okay?" she asked. He glanced at her and she saw the fear in his eyes. Fear he was trying very hard to hide. "First time under fire like that, ma'am." "First time is always the worst. You did good down there." I froze. When the RPG hit, I just froze. "For how long?" I don't know, felt like forever, probably 3 seconds. 3 seconds of freezing, followed by 6 hours of fighting. I'll take those odds. She settled in beside him. You want to know a secret? What's that? I'm scared too. Every mission, every firefight, the fear doesn't go away. You just learn to function through it. He looked at her with surprise. Really, but you're a SEAL. You've done this before. Being a SEAL doesn't make you fearless. It makes you capable of acting despite the fear. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a moment watching the desert. Then Morrison spoke again, his voice quieter. My sister's in the army. She's deployed right now, Afghanistan. I always worried about her, worried that being a woman in combat would make things harder for her. It does make things harder, Kira said honestly, but not for the reasons you think. The combat isn't harder. The bullets don't care about gender. It's the other stuff, the constant need to prove yourself, the assumption that you're less capable until you demonstrate otherwise. Is that why you took command so fast to prove you could? I took command because Foster was down and someone had to. The proving part is just a side benefit. Morrison nodded, processing that. For what it's worth, ma'am, I'm glad you're in charge. You got us out of that kill box. Foster would have gotten us all killed trying to stick to the plan. It was probably the most honest thing anyone on the team had said to her. Thanks, Morrison. Now keep your eyes open. First sign of movement, you wake me. Aye, ma'am. She moved back downstairs, found a corner where she could lean against the wall, and allowed herself to close her eyes. Not sleep exactly, but the kind of rest that let your body recover while your mind stayed partially alert. The next 48 hours were going to test everything she'd ever learned. About tactics, about leadership, about survival. And somewhere out there, Admiral Brennan was watching, waiting for confirmation that she was dead. She intended to disappoint him. The attack came at dawn. Kira was on watch when she saw them. A probe force 5 hostiles moving carefully through the ruins of an adjacent building, testing their defenses, looking for weak points. She could have opened fire, taken them down easily. But that would have revealed their positions and wasted ammunition they couldn't afford to waste. Instead, she let them get close, let them think the farmhouse was abandoned. Then she keyed her radio. All positions, we have movement. 5 hostiles, northeast quadrant. Hold fire until my command. The hostiles moved closer. 300 meters, 200, 100. Morrison had placed tripwires connected to tin cans filled with rocks. A crude early warning system. When the lead hostile hit the wire, the cans rattled loud in the morning silence. The hostiles froze, realizing their mistake. Fire! The SEALs opened up with disciplined precision. Controlled pairs aimed shots, no wasted ammunition. The 5 hostiles went down in seconds, their bodies dropping into the dust. Silence returned, broken only by the echo of gunfire fading across the desert. Kira scanned for additional threats. Saw none. But she knew this was just the beginning. That probe had told the enemy everything they needed to know. The farmhouse was occupied, it was defended, and it would take a larger force to overrun it. That larger force would come. It was just a question of when. She gathered the team for a briefing. They know we're here now. Next attack will be larger, more coordinated. We need to maximize our defensive advantages. I want overlapping fields of fire fallback positions identified and ammo conserved. If we're smart, we can hold this position for days. And if we're not smart, one of the Alpha team guys asked, then we won't have to worry about 48 hours. They worked through the morning improving their positions, building barriers from rubble, setting up additional early warning systems, rationing their water and ammunition. Kira spent time with Foster, checking his wounds, changing dressings. His fever was rising, which meant infection was setting in despite the antibiotics she'd administered. He needed a hospital, not a mud brick farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. How bad is it? He asked, his voice stronger now. You'll live, but you need to rest. Can't rest. Should be leading. You are leading by trusting me to do what needs to be done. She met his eyes. I need you to trust me, sir. Can you do that? He was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Never doubted your capability, Thorne. Only your place, old habits. Old thinking. I get it. The teams have been a certain way for a long time. Change is hard. Change is necessary. You've proven that today. He grimaced as pain flared. When we get back, I'm putting you up for a silver star. Maybe more. You saved this team. We're not back yet, sir. Let's survive first, then worry about medals. But his words meant more than he probably knew. Validation from someone who had doubted her. Proof that competence could overcome prejudice, even if it took a firefight to make it happen. The second attack came that afternoon. Larger force, maybe 20 hostiles with 2 RPG teams and a PKM machine gun providing suppressive fire. Kira had anticipated this. She'd positioned Morrison with the M110 on the roof with specific instructions to target the RPG teams first. The kid had proven himself a decent shot during training. Now he'd get to prove it under fire. The battle was brutal and efficient. Morrison dropped both RPG teams before they could fire. Kira and the other SEALs engaged the infantry with precise aimed shots. The PKM gunner tried to set up in a ruined building 300 meters out, but Kira put 3 rounds through his position and the gun fell silent. The entire engagement lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, the enemy had withdrawn, leaving their dead behind. But the cost was adding up. They'd expended nearly a third of their ammunition. Water was running low. And the enemy knew they were here, which meant eventually they'd bring enough force to overrun the position. Kira needed an edge, something to change the equation. That night, after the team had settled into their watch rotations, she pulled out her tablet and began going through the intelligence package again. There had to be something she'd missed, some piece of information that would help her understand what was really happening. She found it buried in the metadata of the satellite imagery. The photos that had been used for the mission briefing weren't 48 hours old. They were 6 days old. And the updated imagery that showed the correct building had been uploaded to the system but never distributed. Someone had deliberately provided old intelligence, had deliberately sent them to the wrong compound, and that someone had access to classified SEAL mission planning systems. She switched to the encrypted channel. "Guardian Nomad, you there?" Garrett's voice came back immediately. "Go ahead, Nomad. I need you to check something for me, the mission intel package. Who uploaded it to our system?" "Stand by." She waited, listening to the sounds of the desert night. Somewhere in the distance, a vehicle engine. The enemy regrouping, probably, planning their next move. Garrett came back. Package was uploaded by Captain Vivian Drake, operating under authorization from Admiral Brennan's office. There it was, confirmation of what she'd suspected. "Guardian, I need you to do something for me. I need you to access the enemy's communications. They're using tactical radios, probably on a frequency they think is secure." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we turn the trap around. Make them think we're weaker than we are. Draw them into a position where we have the advantage. That's a hell of a risk. We're dead if we stay defensive. Our ammo won't last another day. This is the only play we have." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "I'll get you the frequency. But Kira, once you commit to this, there's no going back." "I know, that's why it'll work. They'll never expect us to go on the offensive." She spent the next hour planning, not with the team, not yet. She needed to work out the details first, identify the risks, find the angles that would give them the best chance of success. The enemy had made a mistake. They'd assumed she'd fight defensively, that she'd try to hold the farmhouse until relief arrived. That's what any reasonable commander would do. But Kira hadn't become a SEAL by being reasonable. She'd become a SEAL by being willing to do what others wouldn't. And right now, what others wouldn't do was take the fight to an enemy that outnumbered them 3-1. At first light, she gathered the team. "Here's the situation," she said, spreading a hand-drawn map on the floor. "We're running low on everything, ammo, water, time the enemy knows it. They're planning a major assault probably tonight to finish us off." "So what do we do?" Morrison asked. "We hit them first." The team stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "LT," one of the Alpha guys said carefully, "we're outnumbered, outgunned. How exactly do we hit them first?" "Because they're not expecting it. They think we're pinned down, desperate, waiting for rescue. They've gotten comfortable, set up a base camp 4 clicks west. If we hit that camp at dawn, we can take out their leadership, capture their supplies, and buy ourselves the time we need." "That's insane," someone muttered. "It's tactical," she corrected. "Insane would be sitting here, waiting to die. This gives us a chance," Foster, propped up in the corner, spoke up. His voice was weak but clear. "She's right. We take the fight to them, or we're dead by sunset. I vote we do it. One by one, the others nodded, not because they thought it was a good plan, but because they trusted that she'd gotten them this far, and maybe she could get them the rest of the way. They moved out an hour before dawn, leaving Foster in the farmhouse with enough ammunition and water to survive if things went wrong. 8 SEALs moving through the darkness, like ghosts, toward an enemy camp that had no idea death was coming. Kira led them on a wide flanking route approaching from the south where the terrain provided the best cover. They moved slowly, carefully stopping every 100 meters to listen and observe. As the sky began to lighten, she saw it. The enemy camp, 20 tents arranged in a tactical formation. Guard posts on the perimeter, a command tent in the center larger than the others. She positioned her team in a rough semicircle around the camp's southern edge, assigned each SEAL a specific target, synchronized watches. Then as the sun broke over the horizon, they attacked. The battle was over in 90 seconds. Precision fire from 8 directions simultaneously catching the enemy completely off guard. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. Their leadership was down, their defensive positions compromised, their camp in chaos. Kira and her team moved through the camp like a storm-clearing tent, securing weapons and capturing one very specific individual. An arms dealer who happened to have a laptop computer in his possession. A laptop that Garrett had told her about. A laptop that contained financial records proving Admiral Brennan's 20-year operation selling weapons and intelligence to America's enemies. She grabbed the laptop, secured it in her pack, and signaled the team to withdraw. They were back at the farmhouse by mid-morning, tired but alive with enough captured supplies to last a week if necessary. Kira opened the laptop while the team rested. It was encrypted, but she had the decryption key Garrett had provided. Within minutes, she was looking at financial records that would end Brennan's career and put him in prison for the rest of his life. 87 American deaths, 20 years of betrayal, all documented in neat spreadsheets and bank transfers. She looked up at her team, at Foster, still weak but smiling at her success, at Morrison, who'd become a warrior overnight, at the others who'd stopped seeing her as a woman and started seeing her as their leader. "We got it," she said simply. "We got the proof." Foster nodded. "Then let's go home." Garrett arranged their extraction for that night. A helicopter that officially didn't exist, crewed by people who officially weren't there, landing at coordinates that officially weren't in Yemen. As the team loaded onto the helo, Kira took one last look at the desert, at the farmhouse where they'd survived, at the landscape that had tried to kill them and failed. She thought of Linnea Sullivan, who hadn't survived her own mission, who died trying to expose corruption just like this. "This one's for you," she whispered into the wind. Then she climbed aboard, and the helicopter lifted into the night sky, carrying 8 SEALs in one laptop computer, full of evidence that would change everything. Behind them, Yemen disappeared into darkness. Ahead, the real battle was just beginning. The fluorescent lights in the JAG office at Naval Base Coronado were too bright, too sterile, too far removed from the dust and blood of Yemen. Kira sat in a hard plastic chair, still wearing her desert fatigues, the smell of cordite and sweat still clinging to her skin. Across the table, 2 Navy lawyers shuffled papers with the mechanical efficiency of people who process tragedies every day. Commander William Hargrove stood against the wall, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. He'd been waiting when they landed, along with a security detail and an official order placing Lieutenant Kira Thorne under investigation for unauthorized combat operations in violation of rules of engagement. The laptop sat on the table between them, sealed in an evidence bag. Untouched, unexamined, as if the truth it contained was less important than the process of determining whether she'd followed proper procedure while obtaining it. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," the senior lawyer said, her voice flat and professional. "You're claiming that Admiral Brennan, one of the most decorated officers in the United States Navy, deliberately compromised your mission and attempted to have you and your team killed." "That's correct, ma'am. And your evidence for this extraordinary claim is a laptop computer you obtained during an unauthorized raid on what you believe to be an enemy camp. The raid was authorized under tactical exigency. We were under fire cut off from command and needed supplies to survive. The laptop was seized as intelligence material during a legitimate combat operation." The lawyer's expression suggested she'd heard better stories from recruits caught drunk on duty. "Lieutenant, do you understand the severity of what you're alleging?" You're not just accusing a superior officer of misconduct. You're accusing him of treason, of deliberately getting American service members killed. These are not charges to be made lightly. I'm not making them lightly, ma'am. I'm making them because they're true. The junior lawyer leaned forward. Then you won't mind if we examine this laptop. Verify your claims. I have no objection to examination, but I want it on record that the chain of custody must be maintained. That laptop contains evidence of financial transactions spanning 20 years, evidence that could be altered or destroyed if it falls into the wrong hands. Are you suggesting that this office would tamper with evidence? I'm suggesting that Admiral Brennan has significant influence and resources, and that people who've threatened him in the past have had a habit of dying. The room went very quiet. Commander Hargrove finally spoke. That's a serious accusation, Lieutenant. Yes, sir, it is. She met his eyes. Captain Felicnia Sullivan made similar accusations in 2004. 3 days later, she was dead, officially killed by enemy fire, unofficially murdered by contractors working for Admiral Brennan. You have proof of this. Master Chief Garrett Sullivan has spent 20 years gathering proof. I'm willing to testify to what Captain Sullivan told me before she died. Her own father heard her final words. She named Brennan. The lawyers exchanged glances. This was getting too big for a simple investigation. This was heading toward court-martial territory, maybe even civilian prosecution. We'll need to interview Master Chief Sullivan, the senior lawyer said. He's waiting outside. And Lieutenant Commander Foster, what's his account of the mission? He's in medical, recovering from the wounds he sustained when we were ambushed. But he's lucid, and he'll testify that the intelligence provided for our mission was deliberately falsified. Another exchange of glances. The junior lawyer stood. We'll need to escalate this to the Admiral's staff. In the meantime, Lieutenant Thorne, you're to remain on base. No communications with media or outside parties. No discussion of the mission with anyone except your assigned legal counsel. Understood. Understood, ma'am. They left, taking the laptop with them, and Kira was alone with Commander Hargrove. He studied her for a long moment. You've created quite a situation, Lieutenant. I survived quite a situation, sir. Now I'm reporting it. You understand that if these allegations are false, your career is over. Probably your freedom as well. Falsely accusing a flag officer is not a small thing. And if they're true, sir, how many more people have to die before someone takes action? Hargrove didn't answer that. He simply nodded and left the room, leaving her alone with the weight of what she'd started. The door opened again a moment later. Garrett Sullivan stepped inside, his face lined with exhaustion and something else. Hope, maybe. Or fear that Hope would be disappointed again. They took the laptop, she said. I saw. Did they believe you? I don't think belief matters to them. They're lawyers. They care about evidence and procedure. Garrett sat down heavily. 20 years. I've been trying to get someone to listen for 20 years. Every time I got closed doors slammed shut, witnesses recanted, evidence disappeared, I started to think maybe I was crazy. Maybe I'd built a conspiracy out of grief. You're not crazy. I saw the financial records. 87 American deaths traced directly to Brennan's intelligence leaks. $47 million in payments from arms dealers and hostile governments. It's all there. If they don't bury it, they won't. Foster will testify, my team will testify, and I'm betting once people start looking closely at Brennan's career, they will find other irregularities. Other suspicious deaths and compromise operations. Men like him don't start evil overnight. There's always a pattern. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Linnea would have liked you. You have her courage, her refusal to look away from hard truths. I wish I could have met her. She'd have been 44 now, probably still in the Army, probably training combat medics somewhere, passing on what she learned. His voice cracked slightly. Instead, she's a name on a wall, a statistic, a story told to warn others about the cost of doing the right thing. She's more than that. She's the reason we're sitting here now. The reason that laptop exists. If she hadn't documented what she saw, if she hadn't refused to stay quiet, Brennan would still be operating with impunity. And how many more would have died? Exactly. The door opened again. One of the lawyers, the junior one, stepped inside. Her expression had changed, less skeptical now, more uncertain. Master Chief Sullivan, we need your statement. And Lieutenant Thorne, there's been a development. Admiral Brennan has requested an immediate court of inquiry. He's demanding the right to face his accuser. Garrett and Kira exchanged glances. When, Kira asked. Tomorrow, 0900, full formal proceeding. The lawyer paused. He's also bringing his own counsel. This is going to be high profile, Lieutenant. Very high profile. Are you prepared for that? Was she prepared to sit across from a man who tried to have her killed, a man who'd murdered a fellow officer to cover his crimes, a man who'd spent 20 years betraying everything the uniform was supposed to represent? Yes, ma'am, I'm prepared. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread through the base like wildfire. A female SEAL accusing a decorated admiral of treason. The kind of story that drew spectators like a car accident drew rubberneckers. Kira sat at the defense table, her service dress blues crisp and perfect, her SEAL trident gleaming on her chest. Her assignee counsel, a young lieutenant commander named Richards, sat beside her, radiating nervous energy. Across the aisle, Admiral Preston Brennan sat with his own legal team. 3 civilian attorneys in expensive suits, the kind of legal firepower that spoke of serious money and serious connections. Brennan himself looked every inch the distinguished officer. Silver hair perfectly groomed, uniform immaculate, the Navy Cross ribbon prominent among his decorations. He hadn't looked at her once. The presiding officer, a rear admiral named Morrison, called the proceedings to order. This court of inquiry has been convened to investigate allegations made by Lieutenant Kira Thorne against Admiral Preston Brennan. Lieutenant Thorne, you may present your opening statement. She stood her hands steady, her voice clear. On October 15th of this year, I deployed to Yemen as part of a SEAL team tasked with extracting a high-value target. The intelligence provided for this mission was deliberately falsified. We were sent to the wrong compound at the wrong time and walked directly into a prepared ambush. Lieutenant Commander Brian Foster was critically wounded. Our communications were jammed, preventing us from calling for support. This was not bad luck or faulty intelligence. This was attempted murder. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Morrison gabbled for silence. During our subsequent survival and evasion, I obtained a laptop computer containing financial records. These records document 20 years of weapons trafficking and intelligence sales by Admiral Brennan to hostile foreign actors. 87 American service members have died as a direct result of his actions. This includes Captain Linnea Sullivan, who was murdered in Fallujah in 2004 after documenting war crimes committed by contractors under Admiral Brennan's protection. More murmurs, louder now. I am prepared to present evidence. I am prepared to submit to questioning. And I am prepared to face any consequences for bringing these charges. But I will not be silent while a traitor wears our uniform and sends good people to die. She sat down. The room erupted in whispered conversations. Morrison gabbled again, harder this time. Order, Admiral Brennan, your response. Brennan stood slowly, his movements precise and controlled. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority earned over 4 decades of service. Mr. President, members of this court, what you've just heard is a fantasy concocted by a disturbed officer who has a history of difficulty accepting authority. Lieutenant Thorne has been transferred 3 times in 2 years due to personality conflicts and an inability to function within the team structure. Kira felt Richards tense beside her, but she kept her face neutral. The mission to Yemen was planned and executed according to standard protocols. If the intelligence was imperfect, that is the nature of intelligence work. We operate in an imperfect world with imperfect information. To suggest that I or anyone in the chain of command would deliberately endanger American lives is not just wrong, it's obscene. He paused, letting his words sink in. As for this laptop computer and its alleged contents, I have no knowledge of it. I have no connection to weapons trafficking or intelligence sales. These accusations are the desperate inventions of an officer who has failed at every command she's been given and is now lashing out at convenient targets. He sat down, and Kira could see it in the faces around her. Doubt, uncertainty. Brennan was good, polished, believable. Lieutenant Thorne, Morrison said, you've made extraordinary claims. Present your evidence. Richard stood. The defense calls Master Chief Garrett Sullivan. Garrett walked to the witness stand, his bearing still military despite his years. He was sworn in and took a seat. Master Chief, Richards began. Please tell the court about your daughter, Captain Linnea Sullivan. Garrett's voice was steady but heavy with old grief. Linnea was an Army combat medic. She deployed to Iraq in 2003, served with distinction. In April 2004, she was assigned to Fallujah during the height of the fighting. What happened there? She witnessed American contractors employed by a private military company executing Iraqi civilians. Not combatants, civilians. She documented it with photos and video. She intended to report it through her chain of command. Did she get that chance? No, sir. 3 days after she told me about it, she was shot. The official report said enemy sniper fire. But I was there. I held her as she died. And she told me the truth. It wasn't the enemy. It was our own people. Did she name anyone specifically? She said Brennan knows. Those were among her last words. Brennan's lead attorney shot to his feet. Objection. This is hearsay. The alleged victim is deceased and cannot testify to what she actually said. Your Honor, Richards countered, this is a dying declaration which is an exception to hearsay rules. Master Chief Sullivan is testifying to his daughter's final words. Morrison considered. I'll allow it. Continue. Master Chief, what did you do with this information? I tried to investigate, tried to find evidence, but every door I opened got slammed in my face. Files disappeared. Witnesses recanted. I was warned unofficially to let it go, that pursuing this would be bad for my career and my health. Who warned you? I don't know names, but the message was clear. Drop it or suffer the consequences. And did you drop it? Garrett's jaw tightened. No, sir. I spent 20 years gathering whatever scraps of information I could find, building a picture of a conspiracy that went all the way to the top. And when Lieutenant Thorne arrived at Coronado, when I saw her dedication and courage, I knew she was the one who could finish what Linnea started. Richards nodded. No further questions. Brennan's attorney approached the witness stand with the predatory confidence of someone who'd destroyed better witnesses than this. Master Chief Sullivan, you loved your daughter very much, didn't you? Yes, sir. And her death devastated you? Yes, sir. Is it possible in your grief that you misheard her final words? That you've spent 20 years pursuing a conspiracy that exists only in your imagination as a way to cope with a senseless death? Garrett's eyes went hard. No, sir. I know what she said, and I know what I've seen. What you've seen, you mean the evidence you claim to have gathered evidence that apparently no official investigation has ever found because official investigations were shut down. By whom? By people protecting Admiral Brennan. Names, Master Chief. Give us names. I don't have names. That's how conspiracies work. The people who get their hands dirty don't leave business cards. The attorney smiled. So we're supposed to believe in this vast conspiracy orchestrated by Admiral Brennan involving unnamed co-conspirators, all to cover up events from 20 years ago. Does that seem reasonable to you? What seems reasonable to me, sir, is that my daughter died because she witnessed a crime, and the man responsible for that crime is sitting in this courtroom wearing 4 stars. The attorney switched tactics. You've harbored resentment toward Admiral Brennan for 2 decades. You've admitted as much. Isn't it possible that you've influenced Lieutenant Thorne, convinced her to seek conspiracies where none exist, used her as a weapon in your personal vendetta? No, sir. Lieutenant Thorne formed her own conclusions based on evidence she obtained independently. Evidence. The laptop. Let's talk about that. The attorney picked up a tablet. According to the technical analysis performed by Navy intelligence, this laptop was encrypted with military-grade algorithms. The decryption key required to access its contents would be virtually impossible to obtain without insider knowledge. How exactly did Lieutenant Thorne decrypt this device? Silence. Kira felt the trap closing. If she admitted Garrett gave her the key, it would support the narrative that this was a setup. If she claimed she broke the encryption herself, they'd question how she had the technical skills and equipment to do so in the middle of the Yemen desert. Richard stood. The defense calls Lieutenant Kira Thorne. She walked to the stand, was sworn in, and took her seat. Every eye in the courtroom was on her. Lieutenant Thorne, Richards began, please tell the court about the mission to Yemen. She did, in precise clinical detail. The bad intelligence, the wrong building, the ambush, Foster's wounds, the desperate survival, the raid on the enemy camp, finding the laptop. And the encryption key, Richards asked. How did you obtain it? This was the moment. The choice between truth and expedience. Master Chief Sullivan provided me with information before I deployed. Information that included a possible encryption key he'd obtained through his investigation. I used that key after seizing the laptop. So Master Chief Sullivan knew you would find this laptop. No, sir. He told me about Brennan's operation. He told me that if I encountered any unusual intelligence or equipment, it might be relevant. The rest was tactical opportunity. Brennan's attorney was on his feet instantly. So you admit this entire operation was pre-planned, that you went to Yemen with the specific intention of obtaining evidence against Admiral Brennan. I went to Yemen to complete my assigned mission, sir. The mission that Admiral Brennan designed to get me killed. Finding evidence of his crimes was a consequence, not a goal. Or perhaps you went looking for evidence regardless of whether it existed because you'd been primed by Master Chief Sullivan to see Admiral Brennan as an enemy. The enemy made himself known when he sent my team into an ambush. An ambush you survived through remarkable tactical skill, almost as if you knew it was coming. The implication hung in the air. She'd known. She'd prepared. Therefore, it couldn't have been a real ambush. Kira kept her voice level. I survived because I'm a SEAL, sir, because I was trained to adapt to changing circumstances, and because I refused to quit even when the situation seemed hopeless. Those aren't suspicious qualities. They're requirements of the job. Let's talk about those requirements. You've been transferred 3 times in 2 years. Can you explain that? Personality conflicts according to my transfer orders. What kind of personality conflicts? The kind where male officers are uncomfortable with a woman in a SEAL team. Or the kind where you're difficult to work with and refuse to accept authority. I accept legitimate authority, sir. What I don't accept is incompetence or corruption hiding behind rank insignia. Morrison gavelled. Lieutenant, confine your answers to the questions asked. Yes, sir. Brennan's attorney circled closer. You're aware that Admiral Brennan has an exemplary record spanning 40 years, that he's been awarded the Navy Cross 2 Silver Stars and the Legion of Merit. I'm aware he's very good at appearing exemplary, sir. Appearing as if his entire career has been a deception. Not his entire career, just the last 20 years. Before that, he was probably a competent officer, but somewhere along the way, he decided that profit mattered more than duty. The attorney picked up the tablet again. Let's examine this laptop. The financial records you claim prove Admiral Brennan's guilt. According to the forensic analysis, these records show accounts in Admiral Brennan's name containing large sums of money from suspicious sources. But there's a problem, Lieutenant. Anyone with sufficient technical skill could create false records, plant them on a laptop, and then discover that laptop in a conveniently timed raid. Kira felt her stomach drop. They'd found the angle. Are you suggesting I fabricated the evidence? I'm suggesting it's possible, probable even. You had means, motive, and opportunity. Master Chief Sullivan provided you with technical knowledge and emotional motivation. You had access to classified information about Admiral Brennan's career, and you obtained this laptop under circumstances only you can verify. My entire team can verify the circumstances. Your team was under your command, following your orders. They saw what you wanted them to see. Richard stood. Objection. Counsel is testifying rather than questioning. Sustained. Get to your question, counselor. Lieutenant Thorne, can you prove beyond any doubt that you didn't fabricate the evidence on that laptop? And there it was, the question that couldn't be answered. Proving a negative was impossible. The burden of proof had been shifted, and unless she could somehow demonstrate that she hadn't created false evidence, the entire case would collapse. She looked at Brennan. He was watching her now, a slight smile on his face. He thought he'd won. Then the courtroom doors opened. Lieutenant Commander Brian Foster walked in, his movements stiff from his injuries, his arm in a sling, but it bearing unmistakably military. Behind him came the 7 other members of the Yemen team, all in their service dress blues. Morrison looked up in surprise. Commander Foster, you were ordered to remain in medical care. With respect, sir, I can convalesce after I testify. Foster walked to the stand. I have something to say about this mission and about Lieutenant Thorne's conduct. The presiding officer looked to Richards, who nodded quickly. The defense calls Lieutenant Commander Brian Foster. Foster was sworn in and took the stand. He didn't waste time with preamble. Looking directly at Brennan, he spoke with the clarity of someone who'd stared death in the face and survived. The intelligence we received for the Yemen mission was catastrophically wrong, not just imperfect. Wrong. Lieutenant Thorne identified the discrepancies before we even left the phobie. I dismissed her concerns. I told her to follow orders and stop second-guessing command. That decision nearly got us all killed. Commander Richards said gently, "Can you describe what happened in Yemen?" We walked into a prepared ambush at a compound that didn't match our intelligence. I was hit in the first 30 seconds. Would have bled out if Lieutenant Thorne hadn't performed field surgery under fire. She then took command of the team, broke contact and led us to a defensible position where we held off multiple enemy attacks for 48 hours with limited ammunition and no support. Why no support? Because our radios were jammed. Professional jamming, not the kind of thing insurgents usually have access to. Someone knew our frequencies, knew our call signs, knew exactly how to isolate us. Do you believe this ambush was planned? I know it was planned, sir. After Lieutenant Thorne obtained the laptop, I examined the financial records myself. I saw payment records to the very militia groups that ambushed us. Payment authorized through accounts connected to Admiral Brennan. The ambush wasn't random. It was purchased. Brennan's attorneys exploded in objections, but Morrison waved them down. Commander Foster, you're making serious allegations. Yes, sir, allegations based on evidence I personally reviewed. Evidence that shows a pattern of compromised operations, sold intelligence, and dead Americans. 87 names on that list, sir. 87 families who were told their loved ones died in combat, when the truth is they died because someone sold them out. He leaned forward, his voice dropping, but losing none of its intensity. I spent 15 years in the teams. I've served under dozens of officers, good and bad, and I've never seen anything like this. Admiral Brennan didn't just compromise one mission. He's been compromising missions for 2 decades, and Lieutenant Thorne didn't fabricate that evidence. She risked her life to obtain it. She saved my life and the lives of 7 other SEALs. If there's anyone in this courtroom who deserves to be questioned, it's not her. The room was absolutely silent. Morrison looked at Brennan. Admiral, do you wish to testify? Brennan's lead attorney leaned in, whispered urgently, but Brennan shook his head and stood. Yes, I'll testify. He walked to the stand with the same measured confidence he'd shown throughout the proceeding, took the oath, sat down. Admiral Brennan, Morrison began, you've heard serious accusations. How do you respond? The accusations are false, completely and utterly false. I have never sold intelligence, never compromised operations, never betrayed my oath or my country. His voice was steady, convincing. What we're seeing here is a confluence of unfortunate circumstances being twisted into a conspiracy theory by people who want to believe in conspiracies. What about the laptop, the financial records? I don't know anything about them. If such records exist, they were fabricated. My finances are a matter of public record. I've never hidden assets or engaged in suspicious transactions. Captain Linnea Sullivan's death. A tragedy. I knew her father served with him briefly. When she was killed, I tried to ensure a thorough investigation. If Master Chief Sullivan believes I was somehow involved, he's wrong. Grief can do terrible things to perception. Morrison studied him. Admiral, if these allegations are false, why would Lieutenant Thorne make them? What would she gain? I don't presume to understand her motivations, sir. Perhaps she genuinely believes what she's saying. Perhaps she's been manipulated. Perhaps she's simply seeking attention. The teams have never had a female SEAL before. Maybe the pressure of that position has affected her judgment. It was masterful. He wasn't attacking her directly, just suggesting gently that she might be unstable, might be delusional, might be a victim rather than a villain. And it might have worked if not for what happened next. One of Brennan's own attorneys stood suddenly, his face pale. Your Honor, I need to request a recess. New information has just come to my attention that requires immediate review. Morrison frowned. What information? I've just been informed that the FBI has executed search warrants at several locations connected to Admiral Brennan. His residence, his office, and 3 offshore accounts. They've seized financial records, communications logs, and encrypted files. The courtroom erupted. Morrison's gavel couldn't restore order. Brennan's face had gone white. On what grounds? Morrison demanded. Based on preliminary analysis of the laptop obtained by Lieutenant Thorne, the FBI opened an independent investigation. That investigation has apparently produced sufficient evidence to establish probable cause for criminal charges. Brennan was on his feet. This is outrageous. This is a witch hunt orchestrated by... The courtroom doors opened again. Two FBI agents entered, followed by a woman in a business suit carrying a briefcase. Admiral Preston Brennan, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. I'm Special Agent Chen from the FBI. You're under arrest for conspiracy, treason, weapons trafficking, and murder. You have the right to remain silent. Everything after that happened in a blur. Brennan being read his rights, his attorneys swarming, the FBI agents placing him in handcuffs, somehow making the gesture look both professional and final. As they let him out, he looked at Kira one last time. The mask had slipped. She saw the rage there, the hatred, the knowledge that he'd been beaten. This isn't over, he said. Yes, she replied quietly. It is. The courtroom slowly emptied. Kira remained seated, feeling the weight of the last weeks finally settling on her shoulders. It was done. Brennan would face trial. Justice would come, however delayed. Garrett Sullivan approached, his eyes wet. She'd be proud of you, he said. Linnea, she'd be proud of what you did. I just finished what she started. No, you did more than that. You proved that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, still matters. You proved that honor isn't just a word we put on recruiting posters. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small case. Inside was a medal, the Navy Achievement Medal with Combat V device. This was Linnea's. She earned it for saving 3 Marines under fire. I want you to have it. Master Chief, I can't. You can. You already do. Every time you lead, you honor her memory. Every time you refuse to quit, she's standing with you. His voice broke. I couldn't save her, but through you, I can make sure she didn't die for nothing. Kira took the medal, feeling its weight in her palm, feeling the connection to a woman she'd never met but who'd changed her life completely. I'll carry it, she said. I'll carry her, always. They stood together in the empty courtroom, 2 warriors bound by loss and purpose, and understood that some battles weren't won in a single day. Some battles took 20 years, but they were worth fighting anyway. 3 months later, the courtroom was packed again, but this time it was a ceremony, not an investigation. Kira stood at attention in her service dress blues as the citation was read. For extraordinary heroism in combat operations against hostile forces in Yemen, Lieutenant Kira Thorne displayed exceptional courage, tactical brilliance, and selfless dedication to her team under the most challenging circumstances. When her unit was ambushed and her commanding officer wounded, she assumed command and led 7 SEALs through 48 hours of continuous combat, ultimately completing the mission and exposing a 20-year conspiracy that threatened national security. Her actions reflect the highest traditions of the United States Navy and the Naval Special Warfare community. The admiral pinning on her Navy Cross was a woman, the first female admiral in the SEAL community's history. Another barrier broken, another assumption shattered. Well done, Lieutenant, she said quietly. You've opened doors that a lot of people tried very hard to keep closed. Thank you, ma'am. The ceremony continued. A silver star for tactical excellence, commendations for her team, public recognition of what they'd accomplished. But the moment that mattered most came afterward in the reception, where families mingled with service members and the formality dissolved into genuine celebration. 3 young men approached her, nervous and formal in their dress uniform. Holden Reese, Bryce Calloway, Ethan Vaughn, the 3 recruits who'd cornered her in that mess hall a lifetime ago. Lieutenant Thorne, Holden began, his voice uncertain. We need to apologize. For what happened in the mess hall, for how we treated you. Bryce couldn't quite meet her eyes. We were stupid, arrogant. We thought we knew everything. My sister deployed to Afghanistan last month, Ethan added. She's an officer now, leading her own platoon. And every time I think about her over there, I think about what we did to you, how we tried to make you feel unwelcome in your own service. I'm ashamed of that. Kira studied them. They'd changed. The swagger was gone, replaced by something harder and more real. combat experience maybe, or just the weight of understanding their own failures. What happened in the mess hall is over, she said. The question is what you do next. Master Chief Sullivan has been training us, Holden said. Extra PT, extra drills. He's been harder on us than anyone. But he told us it's because we have potential. That we made mistakes, but mistakes can be learning experiences if we let them. He's right. You have potential. Don't waste it. Why are you helping us? Bryce asked. After what we did, why recommend we stay in the program? Because someone helped me once. And because holding grudges is a waste of energy better spent on forward movement. She paused. Also because SEALs don't leave anyone behind, even people who've left themselves behind. Holden's eyes reddened. Thank you, ma'am. We won't let you down. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you graduate buds, when you earn your tridents, when you become the kind of warriors who honor the uniform instead of disgracing it. They nodded and moved away, and Kira felt a small sense of satisfaction. Not everyone deserved a second chance, but those three had shown genuine remorse, genuine desire to change. That was worth nurturing. As the three young men walked away, Kira's mind drifted back to that day in the mess hall, the day everything had crystallized. She'd been sitting alone processing the weight of what she'd survived in Yemen when they approached. Holden's smirk, Bryce's bulk, Ethan's uncertainty, the hand on her tray, the hand on her wrist. Walk away, she'd said. Last chance. They hadn't listened. 45 seconds. That's all it had taken. A wrist lock that folded Holden to his knees. The training knife falling from his pocket, evidence of Drake's sabotage. A shoulder strike that put him flat. Bryce charging like a bull, momentum redirected over her hip, 225 pounds of mass, hitting the floor with a thud that echoed. Ethan trying to flee, ankle-swept base collapsed. The room frozen. The silence absolute. Commander Hargrove's voice breaking through. Lieutenant Thorne, the reveal of her rank. The SEAL trident catching overhead light. Recognition spreading like wildfire through the mess hall. That moment had set everything in motion. The investigation, the evidence, the trial. Standing here now, medals on her chest, those three young men transformed from antagonists to allies, she understood something fundamental. The fight in the mess hall hadn't been about proving her strength. It had been about revealing the truth that was always there. She belonged. Not because someone gave her permission, but because she'd earned it every single day. Garrett found her near the refreshment table. Saw you talking to those recruits. They giving you trouble again. No, they were apologizing, genuinely. Good, they've been working hard. They might actually make it through selection. Thanks to you pushing them. Thanks to you giving them a reason to try. He looked around the reception at the medals and the uniforms and the families. This is what Linnea would have wanted, not revenge, legacy, making sure the next generation is better than we were. Speaking of legacy, Kira pulled out a folded paper from her pocket. I've been assigned as an instructor at Buds starting next month. I'll be training the next class. Garrett's face lit up. Outstanding. They need someone who understands what it takes, someone who won't accept less than excellence. And there are 14 women in the next class, more than have ever attempted selection at one time. Because of you, because you proved it could be done. Or because they were always capable and now they finally have the chance. He smiled. Fair point. They stood together watching the celebration, and Kara thought about journeys, about how the path from that mess hall confrontation to this moment had been longer and harder than she could have imagined, but also how every step had been necessary. Every challenge had revealed something about who she was and who she wanted to become. 6 months later, she was standing in the surf zone at Buc Diaz watching Class 347 struggle through Hell Week. Night 3, the coldest, hardest stretch. One of the female candidates, a 19-year-old from Tennessee named Sarah Chen, was at the breaking point. Kira could see it in her eyes. The hypothermia, the exhaustion, the certainty that she couldn't continue. Kira waded into the surf and knelt beside her. I know what you're feeling right now, she said, her voice barely audible over the waves. Your body is telling you to quit. Your mind is showing you a warm bed and a hot meal in the end of this pain. Sarah nodded, teeth chattering. But here's the truth. This feeling, it's temporary. The pain ends. The cold ends. The exhaustion ends. But quitting is permanent. That decision stays with you forever. I don't, I don't think I can make it. Captain Linnea Sullivan sat in water colder than this. She went on to save lives in Fallujah. I sat in this exact spot 6 years ago, went on to lead SEALs in combat and expose a 20-year conspiracy. Now you get to decide, who are you? Someone who quits when it's hard, or someone who endures? Sarah was silent for a long moment, the waves crashing over them both. Then slowly she straightened, found some reserve of strength that hadn't been there before. Someone who endures. Then endure, you've got this. Kira moved on to the next candidate, offering the same quiet encouragement. Not coddling, not making it easier, just reminding them why they'd come and what they were capable of. As dawn broke over the Pacific, Class 347 emerged from the surf zone. Not all of them. Some had rung the bell, made their choice, and that was okay. But Sarah Chen was still there, still standing, still refusing to quit. Kira watched her with satisfaction. Another warrior forged. Another woman who'd proven that gender was irrelevant to courage. The final scene took place in the mess hall at Coronado, the same mess hall where everything had started. Kira sat at a table eating her lunch with the same calm precision she'd always had. But this time she wasn't alone. Sarah Chen approached nervous. "Ma'am, can I sit here?" Kira looked up, a slight smile on her face. "Only if you call me Lieutenant Thorne, or LT." Sarah sat. Then another female candidate joined them. Then Holden Reese, Bryce Calloway, and Ethan Vaughn, all three, now wearing the SEAL trident they'd worked so hard to earn. The conversation was easy. Tactics and training, shop talk and shared experiences. No fanfare, no announcement, just professionals eating together because that's what professionals did. Garrett Sullivan walked in, surveyed the scene, and felt something in his chest that had been frozen for 20 years begin to thaw. This was what Linnea had died for. Not revenge, not justice, though that mattered too. She died for this moment, for a future where gender didn't determine capability, where the uniform meant more than the person wearing it, where honor and courage were measured in actions, not assumptions. He walked to an adjacent table, sat with other senior chiefs, and watched Kira lead her impromptu class in a discussion about room-clearing tactics. She caught his eye, gave a small nod of acknowledgement. He nodded back, understanding, passing between them without words. The mission was complete, not the Yemen mission. The larger mission. The one that had started with Linnea's first breath and would continue long after both of them were gone. The mission to prove that service, true service, belonged to anyone brave enough to earn it. That evening, as the sun set over Coronado, Kira stood before the memorial wall at Naval Special Warfare Command. New plaques had been added recently. One for every service member whose death had been connected to Brennan's conspiracy, and one in particular more prominent than the rest. Captain Linnea Sullivan, United States Army, 1981-2004, honor above all. She touched the engraved letters, feeling their depth under her fingertips. "We did it," she whispered. "Brennan's in prison. 87 families have the truth, and the doors are open now. Not because anyone gave us permission, because we proved we deserved to be here." Footsteps approached. Garrett Sullivan stood beside her, his hand coming to rest on her shoulder. "She'd be proud," he said, his voice thick. "My daughter, your father, all of them. They'd see what you've become and know their sacrifices meant something." "I carry them," Kira said simply. "Every day, every mission, every time I refuse to quit. That's all any warrior can do. Carry those who fell before us. Clear the path for those who come after." He paused. "The next class starts in 2 weeks. 14 women. They'll be watching you just like you watched the memory of Linnea. Then I'd better be worth watching." They stood together as the sun disappeared below the Pacific, the memorial wall bathed in the last golden light of day. Two warriors, two generations united by loss and purpose, and an unbreakable commitment to honor. Behind them, the base continued its evening rhythms, PT formations finishing their runs, the flag being lowered with ceremonial precision. And in the mess hall, sailors and SEALs gathering for dinner, the space where it had all begun, now filled with voices that included women without hesitation, without question, without doubt. The next morning, Kira walked into that same mess hall for breakfast. She moved through the line, filled her tray, and turned to survey the room. The corner table where she'd sat alone 3 years ago was occupied now. Holden Reese was there, his seal trident gleaming on his chest, talking tactics with Sarah Mackenzie, who'd just completed her first successful combat dive qualification. Bryce Calloway laughed at something Ethan Vaughn said, the easy camaraderie of teammates who'd earned each other's trust through shared hardship. They saw her. Holden raised his hand, gesturing to an empty chair. LT, over here. She walked over to set her tray down and sat. No fanfare, no speeches, just warriors eating together because that's what warriors did. The conversation flowed naturally. Urban warfare tactics, upcoming training evolutions. Morrison's terrible joke about a Navy SEAL and a Marine walking into a bar. Groans and laughter mixing with the clatter of trays and the hum of dozens of other conversations. Garrett Sullivan entered, his morning coffee in hand. He saw the table, saw his protege surrounded by the next generation, and allowed himself a small smile. He walked to his usual spot with the other senior chiefs, sat down and watched. This was the victory, not the medals or the recognition or even Brennan's arrest. This, right here. A woman wearing the trident sitting at a table with teammates who saw her as exactly that. A teammate, a warrior, a SEAL. Kira caught his eye across the room. She raised her coffee cup slightly, a silent acknowledgement. He returned the gesture, a nod that said everything. Well done. Keep going. The mission continues. As breakfast continued around her, Kira felt the weight of Linnea's medal in her pocket, felt the presence of her father in the choices she made, felt the eyes of every woman who would come after her, watching to see if the path stayed open or closed again. She would make sure it stayed open. Not by being perfect, not by never failing, but by refusing to quit, by honoring those who came before, by proving again and again that courage had no gender. The trident on her uniform caught the morning light streaming through the windows, gleaming like a promise kept. A promise to Linnea Sullivan, who died defending the truth. A promise to her father, who never saw her become what she was meant to be. A promise to every woman who would wear the trident after her, you belong here. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you earned it. The mess hall hummed with life and conversation and the sound of warriors breaking bread together. And in that ordinary moment, surrounded by teammates who'd become brothers and sisters through fire and hardship and mutual respect, Lieutenant Kira Thorne finally understood what victory looked like.